Hi out there, this is Catalina with Granvia, and I wanted to go ahead and just take a minute to talk about parents. So we, in schools, it's so critical that we have our parent engagement um, activated and mobilized, and that we have a structured plan. But also, I always feel like there's two pieces. There's like the qualitative and the quantitative in terms of like parent and family. You can't just have a structured plan, but you also must have a culture and climate that is warm and welcoming to the parents that you serve. And this means, full on multilingual environment that embraces the language and culture of the families and the caregivers in your learning community. And so there are many things that we need to take into consideration when we are planning our parent and family outreach. First of all, I guess the use of the word outreach, I'm already thinking inreach too. So when it comes to parent and family, you certainly want to be setting up a structure where we have a means to communicate with everybody. And I'm going to start like at the super baseline. We need to have everything linguistically accommodated to be able to communicate with their parents, because what does not get sent home in their language, or even in a way that they're able to understand it and receive the message, doesn't get sent home. So if it's important to us, then that means we should have already had it translated to whatever language that the parent or the family community needs. And then we also need to be sending it home to them in a way that's going to be successfully reaching the parents. So that's another piece, because this is not a checklist where we simply say, well, we sent it home. Like, that is totally inefficient, because if our goal is to authentically increase parent and family engagement, then we're going to need to resort to using methods that are effective. And that means sometimes it's not just putting it in the, Tommy's backpack. Sometimes it is making a text, right? Through using a multilingual app. Then maybe it is following up with a phone call. Maybe it is, meeting parents in the line or writing it on your billboard in different languages. So we want to be sure that we are reaching the parents in any and all ways. Of course, if you authentically seek to increase your student and family engagement, that's going to be the baseline of all baselines. And first of all, communicate the message. One of the other things that we're going to need to do is actually create a culture and climate. And what that means is when people walk into your building, or when they walk into your space, right, they feel welcome. They are welcomed. People embrace them. They can see themselves in the environment, meaning that there are cultural references to them in the environment. That means somewhere in the decorations, maybe there is a bulletin board, maybe there is a space in the library, maybe there is something in the cafeteria, but they can see themselves in the learning environment. Okay, so this is creating a culture and climate where we also don't want to just put people on a billboard and let it be a checkbox. We want to be sure that we are using the means necessary so that the parents and families feel welcome in the school. So it can never be a checkbox method. These are, I would say, criteria, but they're not exclusive, because there's so many different ways that we can have parents feel included. But certainly the environment, creating an environment that is inclusive and representative of the families that attend the school, is certainly right there as fundamental as making sure that the communication is written in their language. So we have now language and accessibility. We also have effective methods of communication. We also have environment, creating an environment that is welcoming, a culture and climate that is embracing of the communities that you serve. Another thing that we should consider are events. So when it comes to events, events are an opportunity for the school to connect with the parents, right? And families. However, in events, we want our parents to be, and again, included. We want them to be embraced. We want them to see themselves. So one of the ways that we can do events, there's actually a couple, and especially in terms of tying it into the Texas exam. One is through decorations in the environment, right? Being inclusive of the parents and families that you serve. The other piece is foods, having foods that are culturally responsive in terms of the foods that the parents and families recognize and that they would actually eat. Maybe foods that are finger foods, but are finger foods that are culturally responsive. That's another way. And we also can leverage through community members and community participation that are representative of the families we serve. So what could that look like? Well, it could look like bringing somebody in from the community that looks and sounds like the parent, maybe bringing in a multilingual representative, maybe from a bank, or maybe from the police force, or maybe from their consulate. Maybe it is a political person that is stepping out and they bring a translator, right? Maybe it could be anything, but they are seeing themselves in a person that is going to speak and participate in the event. So we used to have in Dallas, I'm sure we still do, because actually I checked a couple of years ago, an officer named Paul Thai. Now the Cambodian community and the Asian, maybe even community in Dallas might know Paul Thai. In fact, I know the Cambodian community knows Paul Thai, but like I would say Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian, the Southeast Asian community very much probably knows Paul Thai out of Dallas ISD. Now, Paul Thai was a Dallas police officer, and he would go to these events. He was very involved in cultural events, in the respective countries' New Year's, and he would participate in these events. But he would also participate in school events, and he would represent his community. And so the community would come out, not only just to go to the event, but to see Paul Thai. And so Paul Thai was extremely effective in terms of representing the Dallas Police Department, but also representing the community in academic spaces and in governmental spaces as well. So Paul Thai is I think about him every time I think about community representation and bringing in people from the community that can connect with the community, draw more of a crowd, but not just to draw a crowd. You want to draw a crowd, of course, but you also want effective and authentic connection. And when you identify people like that in your community, we should be stewards of those resources and those assets in our community and bring those into the events so that the parents can be more engaged in their child's school experience. So those I would say are the baseline pieces, right? We have community representation, decorations and environment, including the food. We have creating a culture and climate that is welcoming and warm. That means people are talking, people are saying hi, people are embracing them. And then we also have the linguistic accessibility. So those are pieces that are really baseline. Another piece that I want to go over with you guys is the difference between involvement and engagement versus empowerment. So when parents are involved, that means they are coming to an event. It's more based on compliance. They have things like sign-in sheets, and they are being spoken to. So this involvement is, I think most schools consider involvement being the best that they can do to engage families. But I am going to challenge you to think a little deeper than that. We could look at the word that I just used, engagement, right? And engagement is where we typically have parents that are giving their input. Now they are more participatory in these events. They are participating. They are having some sort of two-way communication process. Maybe they're giving some feedback during meetings. So this is more of an engagement piece. I think of it in terms of they're more active. They're not just taking and receiving the information, but they're more active with the information, right? And then we have the term empowerment. And this term is thrown around often, but Jim Cummins, who's an expert in the field of second language acquisition in education, he makes reference to empowerment as the collaborative creation of power. And so when I think of the collaborative creation of power, I think of a group of people working together to identify what power is going to look like and how everyone has equal input. So what is the system going to look like? How are we all going to participate in that learning community? And how are we going to all participate equitably? So I think of empowerment as an authentic discourse, an authentic conversation with parents and families. We are also anchored in parents giving their input and being involved in decisions that are taking place at the school. So we get their input, but we also ask them, hey, what is it that we need to be doing better? What do you notice that we're doing well? Did you know how bilingual education works? Did you know how dual education works? And so there is an interchange or an exchange of ideas and learning opportunities that are also informed by the parents. And so they are not just talking about things like an engagement, but they're also creating some of the content that we're going to be discussing during our parent meetings. We as schools can't expect that we're doing everything perfectly. And so what we need some feedback from the communities that we're serving to identify how we're doing or what are we missing? What type of ideas can be developing from what we have? And so is there an area where we could go that we haven't gone yet? Yeah, all of those things are our blind spots as educators. Plus, we have limited resources. We don't have all of the resources. Even just as individuals, we can read books, but we don't necessarily know that there's somebody from that community coming into town next week that can present and they love, this type of engagement. We don't know those things because they're outside of our realm of influence. But the families know. The families know. So the families have access to all of these linguistic and cultural and social assets that educators in schools don't have. But if we do not tap in to their learning, if we don't ask them, then there's no way we can have access to these things. Let me illustrate real quick with there's like 3 or 4 stories I have. One of them is this story of Dr. Saldana. She was out of Nacogdoches ISD. And so what she did is she asked the parents through platicas, and we'll go over platicas a little later, possibly in another video. And she got ideas, feedback, and input from what the parents and families felt like they needed, what they would be asking in order to be more engaged in schools, for them to feel like the meetings were more effective and that they walked away with something, right? And so the parents had asked for things like the General Consulate of Mexico to show up. They had asked for an immigration lawyer. And so what she did is she arranged to have these people present at one or some of the school events. And what happened is the community that was probably, and here's another piece that's not written right anywhere, because this is the first time, and I think there's a lot of disillusion, right, and distrust when it comes to multilingual families and schools. They're used to not being involved. They're used to not being engaged. They're used to being spoken to or spoken at. They are not used to participating in, not because they don't want to participate. I believe many families within the realm of course, their abilities, free time and working and all of their responsibilities, they do want to participate. And I know that through firsthand knowledge and secondhand knowledge. And then, so these families began to come out in droves. What happened is the schools ended up having so many parents at these events that they could no longer house them in the school facilities. They had to move them to a community facility. So when it comes to parents just need to be asked. They will tell you exactly what they need. Caregivers will tell you exactly what they need. Not only that, but many times they are very generous with what they have. And we have a large group of small business owners in this community. They're very generous to support the school, be involved in the school. It gives them a sense of pride and connectedness. And also, you're leaving that good example for the child to say, hey, wow, I saw mom and dad, or I saw mom or grandpa or dad or grandma. I saw them involved in the school event. I think that's amazing. So they know their children are watching, and giving them that opportunity to come in will really increase the effectiveness of our meetings, and also give us access to linguistic, cultural, and community assets that otherwise we may not have.